Okay, welcome back, everybody. First off, I would love to introduce you all to Kristy Thomas. She is a writer. She is a business owner. She is a woman of many, many skills. She is is also an educator and one of my favorite people in the whole world. So, Kristy, I'm going to leave it to you to introduce the rest of your team, and you guys enjoy. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about things. Off you go.
Thank you for the intro. Just real quick background on me. I have a bachelor's degree in secondary theater and speech education, an MFA in acting and directing, and an MBA in educational leadership. And I also did the certification program for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Cornell University. And then I started, I have two businesses, one a writing and publishing business, and the second a business that specifically deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have been on stage and in the theater in some way, shape, or form since I was 3, and I'm 42 now, so I've been around for a long time. And I would also consider myself to be a lifelong educator. So I'm going to pass it to Ashley, who will then pass it to Cedric, so we can all introduce ourselves really quick, and then we're gonna get to it.
Great. I currently live in Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I received my BFA in acting at Texas State University in San Marcos. I moved to Chicago to further my training after graduating and living in Austin briefly. I worked with companies like One Year Checkoff, now the company, Jackalope Theater Company, the Chicago Theater Collective, and the New Colony, with a primary focus on new work and experimental work. Once back in Dallas, I served as the diversity advocate for Stomping Ground Comedy Theater, producing women-led and LGBTQIA-led programming. I've performed with Imprint Theater since moving back here and directed for Flexible Gray, and currently serve on the diversity committee for Pegasus Theater, where I've also directed in past seasons. Grateful to be here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cedric, and I'm currently in New York City. And I went to school for acting. I have a BFA in acting from North Carolina School of the Arts. After graduating, I moved to New York, and I did 2 national tours with the acting company, doing classical work. I did Richard III, the Scottish play, and Three Musketeers. I've done a bunch of regional work around the states, and then I just spent 6 years at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival as a part of their acting company, where I did many shows: Pericles, Hamlet, The Wiz, Oklahoma, the musical, Love's Labor's Lost, Antony and Cleopatra. Yeah, played a lot of shows down at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is one of the largest theaters and rotating repertory theaters in America. And now I'm back in New York, about to pound the streets, make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you both for giving your time to this conversation. So I feel like diversity has become like the elephant in the room. And so let's first, when did you recognize that there was an issue with diversity in your communities? And I think that all of us have lived in different places. And so if you can, if you didn't have it everywhere, if you can pick it in a place, and we can start there. And I'll go first, and I'll say, in Kansas City, when I started doing theater, where I took classes and where I did my first shows, there weren't a lot of Black faces, and I don't think there were any brown faces. And so I didn't, as a child, I didn't really see color. So at that point, I didn't know. It was me and this woman named Jackie, who was fantastic. And she was like my mother's age. So I always looked up to her and I got excited to see her. But it was really when I moved to Texas and was teaching in Texas, and I realized that race is a huge thing in Texas, where it didn't seem to be in Kansas City. And maybe it was because I was older. But it was, all white casts of musicals where there are supposed to be people of color in those shows, and it's like, oh, it's about the story. And it's like, yeah, but the story is diverse in and of itself. And so I started to take issues with not being true as a writer, especially not being true to the author's intent. And so that became a big thing for me. So I would say it started in Kansas City when I recognized I was one of few, and it kind of evolved in Texas when I realized that people were taking colorblind to mean something that I don't think it was intended to mean. So Cedric.
Great question. And I think that I got into theater late. I got into theater in high school, like late into high school, actually, junior year, really. And I started to fall in love with this art form. And then, after one year at a school, I decided to transfer to a conservatory training program because I really wanted to dive into this. And I think it was at that school, at North Carolina School of the Arts, that I realized that diversity was an issue, because I was spending my days working on Ibsen and Shaw and Chekhov and Shakespeare and Moliere and Brecht, but somehow in the back of my head, and was somewhat being told to me that, like, oh, these jobs, you're just doing this for training. These jobs won't be available to you after you graduate. So I was like, well, what am I doing? I have all of this skill and this talent that I'm developing, and but you're also telling me that I'm not going to be able to do this. So what will I be able to do? And I remember my junior year, we did an August Wilson play, 7 guitars, and it was so beautiful to finally, that was one of 2 plays in my entire college career that was not written by a white man. And so I remember after finishing, doing that play, and that felt great. But then it was expected to be like, well, all right, you've done that one August Wilson play. There's 9 others that you got to get to. And I was like, okay, well, after those 9, then do I get cut off? Do I get sent away from the theater? And I was like, there's got to be more than just these 10 August Wilson plays. And mind you, now they're more artists of color and more diverse voices are being featured, but it still is like a vast land of things that I feel like I am right for, but will not be considered for.
Gotcha. Okay. Ashley.
I grew up in a community that looked just like me, in Texas, and there was a show in high school. It was Oklahoma, actually, and a young Black woman was cast as Lori. And the conversation surrounding that choice, not only amongst these young suburban teenagers, but at the community at large, adults even, was the first moment that there was this idea that diversity was radical, that there are stories for certain people. My own situation being defined as I'm a white woman, and that is, how the system served me. That was one of the first times that I really was awoken to the need for diversity. As a young girl, I think I was like 17 or 16. It wasn't something that I could totally put all my words into, but that experience was extremely impactful. That was an impact on my life. Once I was in Chicago and hanging around artists who were creating new work, I feel like that was the time that language started to apply to those feelings, to that awareness, to a system that I benefited from. And so that was a big time of growth, which I'm excited about this conversation to get into kind of what that process has been. But it was the first time that I was seeing a diverse community make work. And it wasn't the first question of who should be writing this, who is going to be on stage for this, and seeing the benefits of that. I will say that there was also a levee that broke during my time in Chicago when there was an expose about a theater, and conversations started to be had about the Me Too movement. and how that allowed, what I felt in that time was, okay, if we can question that, because that is messed up, that definitely has to be addressed. I feel like the lens was widened to the full system and structure that we were all operating in as creatives, as theater makers. And so I think that was a time to be alive, to really take a step back as a white woman and say, what is this story? Where are the roots of this issue?
Yeah. What's interesting is both of you used examples that I was kind of, that I've either been a part of or literally was a part of. So to Ashley's story, that show was directed by me.
It was.
And I didn't what's interesting is that until you just said that, I didn't know until right now that the teenagers were talking about her being cast in that part. So that was like really eye-opening. And then Cedric, when I was in grad school, we had to go to the artistic director of the Kansas City Rep and submit plays, because there were two African-American men younger than us, and there was another African-American woman in my class. And we were all like, wouldn't it be great to play a Black role before we graduate?
Yeah, you're like, this is a golden opportunity. There are enough of us.
Exactly. And we were told that we're playing great roles. And it's like, yeah, but these are roles that we would never be cast as in the real world. And instead of it being, I think this was probably the biggest disappointment when I was in grad school, was that the head of our program told us you find the play. You find plays that have a cast that we can do, and you present them, not to him, present them to the artistic director of the Kansas City Rep. And if he says yes, then we'll look at it. And that's exactly what we did. My classmate and I spent our own money, ordered as many plays that fit the number that we had. We presented it to the artistic director, and he said yes. And they brought in a fantastic LA director, Shirley Jo Finney, who I still talk to this day, UCLA graduate and inducted into their Alumni Hall of Fame. And I think to myself, I shouldn't have had to fight for that. None of us should have to fight.
No, you're a student. Yeah. Especially, I mean, you're a student. You're paying money. You are paying money to do their job for them, and to do their job reluctantly for them. That's
right. Yeah. Ashley, I'm gonna let you start off answering this question. So, what does progress, success, accountability, like what does that look like for this conversation? How do we measure the progress and the success of this idea of being more diverse, being more equitable, being more inclusive? These ideas that we're having, because I like to say, as someone who does this all the time, I give all of these ideas and then we log off, or I leave because my job has been done. And there's I feel like the follow through is probably the worst piece of this job. It's like, here are all of the ideas of things that you can do. And then I never know if they're like, oh, okay, great. Rip, shred, and, kind of on to the next box check of things that we need to do as we move on. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that what you said about the box check there at the end, that is something that is very real, that you can feel if that's what you've done. That as a group, whether it's a committee, which I am a full supporter that it first starts with a committee. It starts with a conversation. Mm-hmm. Well, it first starts with recognizing that there's an issue. So you got to first see that. I don't believe that there is ever an opportunity to check the box. I think that it's a continuation of the conversation and the actual action of that will show you if you've built in a system that is equitable, that you do have people that are holding you accountable because you are saying, I want to hear your voice on this. Your opinion matters. Your power matters in this. And setting that as a root base rather than, okay, we have one show that depicts a diverse cast, so there we go. I would recommend that the checkbox method be completely removed from the process. at all. Because it's very easy to sit back and a month after a workshop or a month after a diversity committee meeting, that you feel the inaction. It'll feel sludgy, because if you can set down real actionable goals and have a system in place that involves people, marginalized voices, it gives you that accountability to stay active. So it's a continuous thing. That's how I do feel that it's accomplished, or whenever you feel that you are making the progress necessary.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Cedric, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I love as you said, like the checkbox needs to go away, because when I make a to-do list, a checkbox means that it's done. And that means that you can, and this is not something that is done. It is a conversation. It is a new way, a new process, a new way of thinking, which means that like that you were going to continually have to check in and to work at this. So I think about, like, writing down goals. Well, okay, well, what's the goal for this week or this month? What's the goal for this year, this quarter? What's our 3-year goal or 5? Like, it can't be just like, all right, we checked this box of getting a show, or casting a certain person or a group. It's really has to have some real foresight in it, which
one of my biggest like hashtags and slogans for my diversity business is to be intentional. And sometimes I think, to both of you, I think what happens is that it's like, oh, we're gonna, George Floyd happened, we're gonna put out a statement. Check, box check. We put out a statement, on to the next thing. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that there are so many companies and organizations that want to make diversity this like deep, dark secret that only happens in like the 4 walls of a meeting. So, we are going to set goals, but we're not going to tell anybody about it. And I think that's the most difficult thing for me. And I work a lot with education. And it's like, if your goal is over the course of 3 years to hire 20% more people of color to be your educators, put that on your website. Send that out to, whether it's a theater, send that out to your season ticket holders and to your subscribers and to your parents and to the adults in the neighborhood that supports you, so that it's not a secret. And so sometimes when I share that information, it's like, it's baby steps. And I think that that's probably a part of the problem. Our complaints are answered with, there's always at least one African-American show. And it's like, that's not a secret. We know that. It's always in February. Coincidence? I think not. And I believe that we need to, like, every time something happens and the momentum starts, this should be the one moment finally where it doesn't stop. And history has shown us that, if you give me a piece of cheese, and history has shown us that we eat that piece of cheese and it's like, I'm good with the cheese. It's like, I'm not good with the cheese anymore. I want a T-bone steak, and I want mashed potatoes, and I want a vegetable, and I want a drink that comes with free refills. Like, I want what my white counterparts have been given for decades, if not centuries, on stage. Like, that's what I want. There is no, we're only going to do 2 white male authors. That's not a thing. Because it just so happens that all of the great plays are written by white men.
Yeah.
What? So stuff like that those are always like sticking points for me. I'm gonna give you this one. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that you talked about, like, you want them to, like, put that out, like, don't keep it a secret. And of course, one of the reasons why it is why they may not want to put that out is because if you put that goal out, there's a possibility you could fail, and you have accountability because you said this is our goal, and so I think that it like, organizations need to be okay, need to understand that, like, yes, you can put out a goal and you cannot make it, and then you would have to say at that 3-year mark, this was our goal and we did not make it, and these are the, and so we're going to set a new goal, and these are the things that we're going to do to make this new goal. But like, I think that but saying your goals out loud means that you have the possibility to fail and fail publicly, and that is something that we have to do every day as people, as actors. Failing is part of the job, and we learn.
Cedric, I got excited. I'm on the end of my chair. What's so crazy about that is that, like, we're taught at a very young age as actors, you'll have 10 auditions, maybe you'll get 1 callback. You'll have 100 auditions, maybe you'll book 2 things. Like, if there's one thing that I knew from a very young age, it's how to fail. So it amazes me that so many adults don't know how to fail. They don't know how to accept failure. I teach my students, you are the only person who can decide that you failed. You are applying to get into 20 universities and you're disappointed that you only got into 6. Wait, you got into 6. And it's all about, like, what our mind says is a failure. If I say I'm going to hire 20% African-American teachers in the next 3 years, and I hit 17%, I'm 17% better than I was 3 years ago. That's how I feel like we should look at success, right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like we pay attention to what we didn't do rather than focusing on what we did do. And I think that is like a huge thing.
As Brooke, quoted before in the last, better is better.
Better, yep. James Knight just said that.
Right? Yeah.
Ashley, you were going to say?
I do think that there are ways to incorporate practicing that on smaller scales, because when we do hit these big goals, finding ways to bring it into the daily conversations, or how you are interacting with your diversity boards, or how you are implementing those new systems, that new checks and balances. I know for me, those moments where all of a sudden it's like, defend, that wasn't my intention, or think about it like this, or all of those moments where you're repositioning yourself into that seat of power after you've already said, no, I am needing to take that step back. I am wanting to be in the position of listening and advocating. And so there are small moments that are huge, because it starts to affect how you actually interact with the whole season, with your entire image, with everything. And so I think being able to say, like what you were mentioning about saying, okay, this was our goal at 3 years, we didn't hit it, being verbal about that, and saying, here's what we tried, here's how we're going to adjust that plan as we move forward. It's the same thing in those micro moments that can make, the night and day differences too. I think it's that perception that you have to constantly check in the small moments.
Yeah. And it has the ability, when I say that to students, when I tell that student who got into 6 schools, when I say that to them, it's like a light bulb goes off. And I feel like if we did more of that, starting with our children, imagine the type of adults that they will be when they're looking at the world through the lens of, I don't have to have everything, and I don't have to have everything right now in order to win or in order to be successful. You know what I mean? Like, those type of things are things that, if taught right, are things that you can take with you for the rest of your life and interject them into all of your goals and your goal settings. Cedric, I'm going to shoot this one to you to start off on. So because this is Shakespeare Frankfurt, how can we focus on the classics and still be diverse?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as I said, I've spent the majority of my acting career doing a combination of classical theater and contemporary new work, and that's so at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, that is what I did as well. I did lots of Shakespeare, and then I also did new work. And I think that there's a couple of things. One, realizing that the stories that are being told are not, unless it is a culturally specific, then there's stories about jealousy. There's stories about family. There's stories about wanting and desire. These stories are universal, and so not one type of body, not one type of what gender. These things can have. Or accessibility, ability. These things are felt by all of us, and so one just knowing that and thinking about that allows people access into the story, and then two, I think that while there's a real opportunity to take these classic works and to there are plenty of playwrights who are using these classic works and writing new things on with them. So, for example, this past year in 2020, the show that I was supposed to do at Oregon Shakespeare Festival this last year was called Black Odyssey. And Black Odyssey is a modern day retelling of Homer's Odyssey, who wrote, an Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's told through the lens of an African American soldier coming back, trying to make his way back home. So the Homer's Odyssey is not about particularly, being, Greek or it's about trying to find home and it's about a warrior trying to get back to his family and dealing with all of the things that he did in the war and what the challenges and obstacles that were presented to him. So here we have this beautiful, Marcus Gardley, this amazing, young black playwright who's taking this classic text and telling another story with it that allows other people to see themselves on stage, and it's just a beautiful thing. And there are plenty of other playwrights and plenty of other stories that are using. My friend just wrote a play called House of Sueños, which uses Hamlet, and tells it in a bilingual, modern day way that talks about mental health. Using Hamlet to talk about mental health. It's and I feel like seeing them together with the classics then gives you you see both in a new light. Right. So that's what I would love to see. I would love to see more classical theaters focus on new work that is based on classical work and to be presenting them in tandem. Right. I think that's
I think it's eye-opening. We say the word as actors, right? We say the word classics, and there's an immediate list of last names that are associated with what we consider to be the classics. And most of those people are not people of color. And I don't think any of those people, or very few of them, are women. And so, Cedric, to what you said, 100%, I think that there are so many new plays out there that are written by women, by people of color, that take a classic and do something different with it, that would still to the yearly subscriber of a Shakespeare theater, I believe they would still respect going to see a show that is written by someone who is still alive, that still deals with these classics that we speak of. And I think, I hope that some classical theaters, or if they have not, that more will move in that direction, because there's we can't live in the classics. We just can't. The classics were not written for me as a queer African-American woman. They weren't written for a lot of us, quite honestly. And so it's like, I believe it is possible to bring diverse literature onto a stage that is set up for, under the umbrella of classics, and still be honest and rich to the idea of the classics. Ashley, what do you think?
Yeah, ditto to everything. I think that what Cedric pointed to talk about the universality of a story, like what is the actual story being told, and how freedoms within that have been scaled forever. What do you choose to focus on in the story of Hamlet? What do you choose to focus on whenever you're presenting, a Chekhov story? What these choices, I think, also, not only is it refreshing, which is something that you spoke about, I think it's also one of those mechanisms that you can look at the roots, because it's not just who you put in those roles, but who you put in the driver's seat. Talking about directors, talking about dramaturgy, like looking at the entire group of story makers to say, how do we adjust this lens and widen it and tell it and still hit that same universal message, but within this specific way, because it's been done in the other specific way forever. So yeah, I think that key point of expanding your view on what a universal story is really powerful. It's really, really powerful.
Okay. So next thing is the idea of like chatting about what an audience gains when they see a diverse story on stage. And this goes off of what Cedric said and what Ashley said, and now I'm bringing it back to me, and it's like, Hamlet is a story about this. I don't think if I said, hey, Cedric, what's Hamlet about? That the first thing he would say is, well, it's about a white guy. First of all, like, I don't think that we would say that about probably any of the Shakespeare plays, or, Neil Simon isn't considered to be a classic, a classic writer in the age of it, right? But Neil Simon's plays were about people, and Shakespeare's plays were about people in situations, people in real life situations, people in situations that every person who lives underneath the umbrella of marginalized groups. And for those of you who are listening, in the DEI world, rather than saying, or in addition to saying like BIPOC, specifically talking about people of color, or specifically talking about women, it's the idea of marginalized groups. So marginalized groups are people of color across the board, but it also includes women, and it also includes people over the age of 50, and it also includes like military vets, people who tend to not be represented, and to Ashley's end, not be represented on stage, not be represented behind the stage, not be represented in the booth. The representation idea isn't just as actors on the stage. I think the best thing about like a playbill in New York is that they have the pictures of the technicians as well. And I think that things like that are important. You can't always go to a website and look at their board of directors and it's like, oh, there's 4 white people and 1 person who kind of looks like they might be Hispanic. There's more to marginalized groups than just being able to look at someone and say, Kristy is Black and Cedric is Black, so this is a good balance. There's more to all of us and what we represent than just that. But I think it's important to start changing that conversation so that when a Shakespeare company does a version of Hamlet and the entire cast is Black, I want people to not be surprised. I want it to not be it was everyone on stage was a person of color and it was just amazing. Like, I want things like that to just become normalized. It's normal to see Hamlet be Black. It's normal to see Richard III be a military vet who is in a wheelchair. It's like different things. When we deal with diversity, if we just normalize it, then we're 1,000 years past where we are right now, where we have to be intentional to make sure that in our season, we're going to have at least 1 female playwright, at least 1 new playwright, and like all of these things, rather than it just becoming normalized. And I guess if we could normalize diversity on stage, then the inclusion hopefully will be normalized. And then we'll start recognizing, which is a big part of it. It's like, as I teach in high schools where where I have been one of the only people of color on a faculty of 125 and another faculty of almost 300, it shouldn't be so surprising that I'm there. And It still amazes me that in in 2020, it's I have to run off my resume so that you know that I'm like smart enough to teach your student who is 16 and doesn't know a percentage of what I know. So Cedric, what do you think the audience gains by diversity on stage?
Well, before I just want to say you talked about normalizing diversity, and one of the I can't remember where I heard this, but it has stuck with me, that diversity exists and inclusion must be cultivated. Like, people think about, like, they're like, okay, we have to get diversity, we have to get diverse. I'm like, no, diversity actually exists. It is in the world. We are diverse. There are diverse people on your block. You know what I mean? In the bank, like, there's whatever. There are diverse people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion has to be worked and has to be cultivated. That is where where our work is. So I love the idea of normalizing, like I said, normalizing diversity. But, like, it's normal. It already exists. It just needs, we have to cultivate inclusion. And as for what do people gain from seeing diversity on stage? I mean, like, I think that that one that we're hearing a lot, and because it's so true, is that representation matters, right? So if I go see if I'm in my mid-20s before the first time I see somebody who looks like me on stage, and I didn't, and then of course I'm going to, that story is going to open me up in a way, and I'm going to be able to connect in a way that is rare and special and unique, and everyone deserves to see themselves and to see a story that they connect to. The other side of that, though, is that I love seeing stories of people who do not look like me, because I think one of the beautiful things about theater is that I get to experience a part of somebody else's world, and I get to see how alike we are, even though they live in Iran, and oh gosh, I understand that the way that they're culturally, the way that the father has control of the family is different, and the way that the mother supports the dada is different. But at the same time, it's a father, it's a mother, it's like, I love being able to see, and I think that's how we grow as individuals, and as not only as theater artists, but for an audience member. I think that seeing diverse stories on stage actually helps them go away, because I don't want to always go to see it. Go to the theater and see a story about myself, and I want to see a story about other people, because then I can learn about how I can learn about myself through that story. So I think that diversity is absolutely super important to give your audience. They need it, whether they know it or not.
Ashley.
Dang, yes. So I really, like, I was like snapping under my knee over here. I feel like, especially right now, there's this huge conversation going on about what 2020 has done to us as a people, and what was happening to us before this year of a pandemic, where isolation and echo chambers became even bigger, where all of our experience was so, we were moved by, those staying safe, or if you're in isolation, that experience has been different for people emotionally. But one thing that is kind of a through line is, no matter what, your scope was adjusted. What you're able to see and experience and be impacted on has been totally, it's on a scale, probably, I mean, nothing definite, but it could be totally detrimental to people. We've seen how, between mental health, physical health, all of the things that we as a human people have experienced, no matter what, some impact has happened. And so I think that it's an even larger conversation right now, that when we are back in person, when we are continuing what is virtual theater, when we are continuing the conversation of what stories we tell, there are so many people in need for an expanded narrative beyond the cis, white, heteronormative landscape in that world, that like what Cedric was saying that just like made me feel like I was like was lit up, is that it's so needed, that it is a social service to tell stories, that it is a social service to see another perspective, to be able to say, yes, you know, father, daughter, or something that you can equate to as far as the title or role, but seeing it in a completely different culture, in a different world, no matter what, that's going to expand you in some way, and how healthy that is. Because right now I feel like the viewpoint is so alarmingly narrow.
Yes, fair. So this is going to be our last thing that we address, but Cedric, I'm coming to you first, so be ready. And it's like the idea of kind of a call to action, like how can we, or what can we do to actively put forth effort to make things better for these marginalized groups that we talk about? And we is we, you, Cedric, or you, Cedric the entertainer, Cedric the entertainer, Cedric the actor, like you know, tell us your call to action of things that you can do, we can do. Let's give some ideas of how we can work on normalizing everything.
Yeah. I think that awareness is everything, right? So if you are in a room and you're starting to tell your story, or starting to build a story, and it is not, again, something that is culturally specific to a culture, and you look around and the room looks the same, I think that is a call to be like, wait a second, how can we get more diverse people in this room? Because this story is, if it's not culturally specific, then it will benefit from more people in the room. So I personally, when I'm starting my projects, the projects that I've written, or the projects that I'm directing, I want to make sure that I'm seeing and like I said, and not only seeing, but because it's not always just about things that you can see, but I want to know that the voices in the room are seeing this from many different angles and from experiences that I haven't had, and that we're not telling one version of a story. I think that's something that I feel like I personally can control, in terms of like making sure that I'm surrounding myself with people who have a diverse experience.
Okay, Ashley, you're up.
It's a great question. I think right now, like looking in the projects and the worlds that I'm currently active in, one question is that always comes up is, I'm able to represent a queer community from my own personal life, from my own experience. But I also recognize in the times when my voice as a white woman, when my voice is not needed on something, my presence maybe, or my voice in another way, not necessarily always taking the helm, but making sure that the support structure and the recognition of how broad marginalized voices are, how many communities are actually represented in that.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That maintaining a balance and not hyper-focusing on my own experience as a queer woman is not only has a seat at the table, but is at the lead of the table, or that is making sure that balance is happening. I think that's something that my mind has been on lately, as far as how I've positioned within the work.
Okay. Very nice. I just adore the two of you. I mean, everyone's clapping right now. Everybody's clapping. For me, because I'm in this business owner world, I'm in this education world, and I'm in love being in both of them. I have a couple of ideas. The first thing, and I know everyone has heard this 1,000 times, it's like, have the talk. Like, don't be afraid to talk, right? My thing is always, communication by definition is the sending and receiving of messages. So it doesn't matter if Kristy Thomas is talking to you, if you're not listening and receiving what it is that I am saying. Receiving what someone is saying means that if it doesn't make sense to you, ask questions of clarification, ask as many as you need to, so that you can truly walk away from the conversation feeling like you are full. It is Thanksgiving, you have eaten, you cannot eat anymore. Like, all of this information, if you feel overwhelming after you've talked to me, then I did my job, right? And so I feel like sometimes we are living in fear of, I don't understand why Black Lives Matter. I don't understand why Blue Lives Matter. I don't understand why people aren't just happy with what they have. I don't understand why my theater company has to be more inclusive and be more diverse. We were fine the way that we were doing things. I don't understand. And you won't understand if you are only having these conversations with people who feel the exact same way that you do. Then you're just, as Ashley said, it is an echo chamber. It's like, well, I don't understand why. Well, I don't understand why. Well, I don't understand why. Then we're fine. And nothing changes. And that happens more often than not. So, have the conversation, but be willing to receive it. Here's the other thing. Be willing to be wrong. I tell my students on the first day of school, check your grades, because there are 120 of you, guarantee someone's 100% is going to go in as a 10%. I make mistakes daily. I have no problem fixing my mistakes, but you just have to tell me about them. So often we become adults and all of a sudden we can't make mistakes anymore. And that's just not real. And it's just not true. And I think that if we can get back to a place of learning, my nephew is 10, and every time he learns something really new and cool at school, he runs home. And when he comes over and tells Auntie Kristy, because Auntie Kristy is a teacher, it's always like, Auntie Kristy, did you know what erosion is? It's like, no, what is it? But that is because he sees that his friend Kevin is pink. He calls him pink, not white. He says he's pink. And he has a friend that's brown like me, but he's a lighter brown. And that student is Latino. And so it's like he sees the color, but none of that matters. It's not until he gets older or adults infiltrate his mind that those things start to matter. And then we become adults, and then I have to be right, or I can't offend you. And it's like, but you can. That's the other thing. If someone tells you that you've offended them by something that you've said, there's a big debate. Am I African American or am I Black? And some people ask me, and I'll answer that question. But you have to recognize that if I tell you that it hurts my feelings when you say this, you have to take that. And whether you take it as and apologize, or you take it and you don't understand and ask a question, you still have to take it. And that response needs to be, I'm sorry, can you, correct me? Like, that's how we learn. We do not learn by not allowing people to tell us when we're wrong. It is basic conflict resolution 101. And maybe as a teacher, I accept that more than the normal person would, but like, that's a big thing. As a writer, I write people of color, period. I do. One of my favorite quotes, Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. I wish to see more. I want to write for television. I wish to see more writers of color in the writer's room. I wish to see more marginalized people being a voice, just like Ashley said, sitting at the table, eating at the table, getting full at a table that 10 years ago, we weren't seen on television because we weren't at the table. And when we were seen on television, I would watch it and think, that's not actually, that doesn't feel right, right? Because the person who's in the room speaking for me isn't me. These things matter. Representation matters. Like, what a life changer that there are little African-American girls that get to look at Kamala Harris for the next 4 years. What a gift. I'm 42, and I was like, white men weren't crying when Joe Biden got elected. Like, It's normal. It is normal. Ashley, you'll get your turn. You'll get your turn. But it's like, no, I mean, like, you'll get your turn to see that first one.
I will.
You know?
Well, we have. Look
Right.
at, we have with trans
Yes,
representation in
representation.
our,
It matters so much. And representation for those of you who are writers or who are directors who have, there is a power hierarchy in a theater, just like there is anywhere else. And if you know you are the person of power, it is no one else's responsibility. It starts with you, period. I don't care if your job is, you're the casting director and you're like, well, I only have so much power because I still have to clear these people through the director. Then get the director to see it a different way. Get the director to see it through your lens, because we are all seeing it through a different lens. And all of the ways that we see it are right. If I show you a painting, Ashley thinks it's ugly, Cedric thinks it's beautiful, and I want to burn it, we are all right. And then the last thing, Ashley mentioned diversity board, which I had written down. If you are on here and you are the head of a theater group, starting with a group, if it's not, if you're on a board, or if you're on a board for a theater company and you don't have some type of diversity board, you could start with 2 people. These are all volunteer positions. So you don't have to have a board of 6, 8, 10, 12 people. But having a diversity board is great, because people who do this work will always play, in essence, devil's advocate. Like, this is what you want to do, but what about this? It's not about, well, this is what you want to do and that's stupid or that doesn't work. It's about seeing things from a different lens. And sometimes you're going to hit that 20% and sometimes you're not, right? But I feel like having a diversity board and having those voices is a really forward-thinking option of ways that we can make those baby steps feel like we're in the Olympics doing a long jump. So I'm gonna turn it back over to PJ. Thank you, Cedric and Ashley, for being a part of my panel. I really appreciate you both.
Kristy, thank you so much. Ashley, Cedric, you guys have been really eye-opening. I hope everybody had the ears to hear everything. And to be quite honest, we could have carried this on for another 3 to 5 hours. Because it was very, I hope it was very enlightening, especially for so much of our ensemble and our community that is European. And though we have great diversity in terms of culture, when it comes to, and we have great diversity in terms of other things, it's not always as diverse as the United States is, right? So here's what I'd like to propose for everyone. We're going to take just another short 5 minutes, and then I'm going to bring all the panelists that are available back on, and we're going to have a little group discussion to kind of bring it all together for ourselves for the rest of for this afternoon / early lunchtime for some of you guys. So let's just take maybe 3 or 4 minutes. We'll all come back at 6:55, and we'll spend about a half an hour sharing our last thoughts. Okay? Thanks so much, guys.